Now, before we get completely started, this Thursday class is a little bit more interactive. So we will be going through a lot of poses, but if at any point you have questions or something doesn't quite make sense, you want a clarification, you're more than welcome to put that in chat. And when there's a little break in my whatever I'm saying at the time or whatever makes sense, I will bring that up and we'll go over it. This is going to be focused mostly on the inside of the hips, as well as looking for inner stability, both in the body, but also in kind of the heart and soul kind of, or distractions, like to try to get those out a little bit. So let's take a comfortable seat. And if it's comfortable, feel free to close your eyes. And start to just bring yourself into the present moment. Notice where you are now. And maybe give yourself a little thanks for putting in this time for self-care. Notice the natural pacing and style of your breath, what it feels like right now. And also notice the current quality of your mind. You don't need to assign any judgment or reprimand it for being any way that it is. Just notice how it is in this moment. And we're going to switch our breath now to a little bit of self-control. Our self-controlled breathing, which is going to be, we're going to use the Ujjayi breath. So it's going to sound and feel like you're breathing through the back of your throat, and that's going to be kind of the intention here. So it'll kind of make a sound like this. I've heard this called like the Darth Vader breath, or it also kind of has like, it's your almost snoring sound. But see if you can do that, breathing down deep into the belly first. And let's do that a few more times at your own pace without feeling breathless. Let it be a breath that's supportive. This breath is going to be our companion today. You can think of it as your sidekick, your NPC, your companion. And we're going to keep them close by the whole class. Notice as this breath starts to support you, maybe each inhale, you might even notice that you sit up just a teeny bit taller. Maybe you do so intentionally. And each exhale, you settle into your seat a little bit deeper. 2 more times. Last one. And maybe you notice any changes that happen even just by doing this simple breath, which is also called victorious breath, and how this traits your mind and body. Let's come off the block now, and we're going to lay down on the back. You don't need any blocks or blankets yet, but have them nearby. Now we're going to start with the inner line of the hips, and we're going to focus on strengthening here. So I want you to take your fingertips and place them just on the inner line of your hip bone. So if you find your hip bone here, bring it just internal, a little bit more towards center, onto the soft point. And this is going to be, again, just a way to sense kind of what the muscles are doing in your hips. And we're going to slowly bring one knee out to the side. So just for the first time, you're going to take, as you exhale, drop the left knee down to the left, but keep the hips facing towards the ceiling so the hips try not to move. As you inhale, you're going to draw the knee back up to center. So a couple things that are happening is your right knee is trying to stay stable. Your left knee is slowly falling out to the side, maybe even matching your breath in tempo. And for now, just notice how far it goes. Maybe what the quality of the motion is. Maybe it's choppy. That means something. Maybe it's really smooth. That means something else. I won't talk about that right now, but they all have little signs here. The blade edge of the foot kind of rolls out a little bit. You might feel the outside of the glute engage. Let's do 2 more times on this side. Maybe your fingertips, notice the muscles underneath on the front of your pelvis start to strengthen and lengthen. Maybe they feel little twitches as it goes back and forth. Last time. And as you come back to center, let's do the other side. The challenge here might be just trying to keep the hips staying up, so it's just the rotation of the knee that opens up your hip, but not a rotation of the pelvis. And that your left knee may wobble a little bit, but it's doing its best to create stability by pushing lightly into the floor. Out of curiosity, maybe you'll see what happens if you lift your elbows up lightly, so your elbows are no longer a support. Does that make it more or less challenging for your knee to roll out? A couple more times. Slow and in control. Last time, and bring it back to center. And then from here, we're going to roll onto one side. So let's roll onto the left side to start. And from here, you might take your pillow and roll it up as like your blanket as a pillow, because this will actually be supporting the head. You can also use the arm as you see fit. And then if you don't have blocks, that's okay too. But what we're going to do is bring the knees up to 90 degrees and then place the block just in front of the knees here. Now the goal for the block is that it's going to help you see if your hips are stable or not, or stacked. So if the knees come forward, it'll knock your blocks over. And we're going to try to keep it just about level with that. So for you to be able to see me a little bit, I'm going to turn just a little bit more. But from here, right hand comes up onto the hip, and then you're going to draw the right knee up as high and as smoothly as it can, without knocking the blocks over and without rolling backwards. And then slowly roll the knee back down. We're going to do this a whole bunch of times, and you're going to feel a lot of things. Your right hand, I did say your hip. I did mean kind of on the what's called the just below the trochanter, which is the big hip bone underneath. So put your hand a little bit lower, closer to the butt and thigh connection. So again, you can sense as the leg lifts up, there's tension that builds up. This is strengthening. And as you slow control it back down, we're looking for that sense of smoothness. If you have capacity for more, focus on your Ujjayi breathing here. Inhale all the way down. Exhale on the way up. Almost there. Let's do 2 more. I know by now you're likely feeling some heat and some motion. Maybe it starts to get a little bit shakier, or maybe your knee just isn't able to get up quite as high as it did the first few times. Go ahead and rest there for a moment. So hopefully if you're feeling something on the outside of the glute, you're definitely not alone on that one. You can just roll over. I'm going to flip sides so that I stay facing forward as we repeat on the other side. Take a comfortable position for your head, because it's not meant to be in tension right now. Knees up to 90 degrees. Hips stay stable, and then blocks are your guide. Hand on your hip, or just below your hip. Lift up. Control, slow, lower back down. And again, noticing if your hip starts to roll back, can you invite a little bit of strength into the side body for a little bit of stability? The hips rolling back will give the illusion that you're lifting your knee higher, which in a sense you are, but we want to focus on the outside of the glute here. If you knock the blocks over, that's okay too. This is all just an exploration and learning of your own motions. A few more times, moving with your breath. What do your fingers sense as you move? Can they feel the muscles change inside your leg? Two more times. And embracing the little fire that's building inside last time. And control back down. Good. And from there you can roll back onto your back and just take first a moment to notice the differences in your hips. Blocks can be moved just off to the side. And now we're going to take the blanket. And as we set up, this can be a time for questions or anything that might come up. But we're going to take your blanket and we're going to roll it. This is a very thick blanket, so you might, if you have a thinner blanket, you might take it more into a thicker fold. This one I'm going to do a little bit less, so only folded twice as we work through, just so there's not quite as much lift. Now, going back to the first position, we're going to take the blanket or lift, whatever you have, and we're going to place it just underneath the right hip, just a little bit lower than where, or just a little more internal than where you had your fingers before, so that your right hip is a little elevated and your feet are just like we did in the first position. So we're actually returning to the first motion, but this time we have support for your hip here. And again, we'll take the right leg with the hands on the hips. Right leg falls out to the side. And then slow and control comes back to center. And fall isn't quite the right word because it's not out of control. You're lowering your leg. Maybe you sense that the hip is more able to open up, or maybe not. Breathing into the motion. Can you keep your thoughts centered and present? Sometimes we'll have the tendency to plan for the future or just to fall into fantasy. We don't need to reprimand ourselves for that when it happens. We just gently redirect ourselves back into the present moment, into this experience. This is part of increasing our focus, is noticing the times we're out of it, and especially without judgment coming back. 2 more times. If you're able to get lower, you might feel more strain on the inner thigh. It will give more range of motion, if nothing else. So Rubik's asked, is this one's supposed to put more strain on my inner thigh? So when the knee is able to tuck out because the hip is lifted, you may feel a sense of a little bit more strain on the inside. Go ahead and relax, and let's switch sides. What we're also doing here, which is a little preview for what's coming later, is we're activating the outside of the glutes, which are an underactivated muscle for most people, which will help us set up for some of the more challenging poses that we'll be in so that we can hold with inner stability a little bit better. So blanket underneath the left side or the opposite side, whichever one you didn't do, hands on the hips, and just a few times we're gonna go out and back in. As with any motion we do, if you get into the motions or sensations of pain, definitely do a little bit less. But we're doing a couple things, inner hip strength, but also focusing on being present for inner stability of heart, mind, and soul. It's also a chance for a little exploration within these muscles. These are akin to what are called the deep six muscles, which is a bunch of muscles on the outside of the hips and are stabilizers for the butt and are a little bit neglected, especially for those of us that play a lot of video games. So we're giving them a little bit of gentle engagement, which for some of us may not feel gentle, it may feel very intense. And we're helping bring them back to life and awareness. Gentle release. And the next time you come to center, you can move the blanket out of the way. And then make your way up to standing. So this next one is one of my favorites. It's very subtle in a lot of ways, but we're going to take whatever stable objects you have for your hands out in front here, feet wide with your toes slightly turned out. You can relax your head, neck, and shoulders to come down, so you're in a wide leg forward fold. And then from here, you're going to keep your head hanging heavy and your fingertips just light on the blocks here. Push into the left inner arch of the foot and drop your left hip down so that your right hip raises up. This is very subtle, but it may feel that your left leg is getting longer than your right leg. Come back to center, inhale. And then exhale, we're gonna switch, press into the right big toe, right inner line of the foot, so your right hip drops and your left hip raises. You might feel sensation all the way from the outer hip, maybe even into the mid-lower back, side body. Switch sides. With your own breath, going back and forth, inhale to center. Exhale, drop your left hip, lengthen your left leg. To center and lengthen to the left. Ooh, I got a little pop in my hip there. Inhale to center. And as always, if my breath pacing isn't matching yours, always go with what feels best in your body. One more time to each. My nose is slowly somehow getting clogged more and more, so the breathing is getting a little more challenging. Come back to center. And then walk your hands out forward so that they would be in what would be considered downward facing dog position. So the arms are out longer and you drop your shoulders down. Press your hips back behind you and relax your shoulders towards the ground. We'll hold here for 3 or 4 breath cycles just as a moment of reflection. See if you can notice what your legs have sensed or what changes may have happened through our motions. Five, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Take your hands to your hips, slowly rise up, and then heel toe your feet in. It'll feel a little bit like a little dance. Boop, 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 boop. It's actually one of my favorite things to do in yoga classes. All right, so now you might feel a lot more heat in your legs, and we're not done with those yet. We're gonna stick with just basically lower body and hip motions today as we work through. For the next position, we're going to make sure I have the right one in my head. Yeah. we're gonna take the blocks on either side of, I'm gonna mirror you from here on out. So if I have my left leg forward, I'll still be talking about the right. So step your right leg forward, toes facing forward, and your left toes turn inward just slightly. Your blocks will be on either side of your foot, and then as you bend your front knee to come into a warrior pose, you'll be in whichever height here is again supportive for how long we're gonna be going today. Fingertips to your blocks, and then pressing through the inner left big toe and inner left side of the foot to make the leg long. Gonna draw the hips in, and then round through the spine to look towards your left foot into what is like cat pose for the upper body. And then do the opposite, round into what would be like a cow pose, so your your back will get long as you say onto your hands and fingertips. Inhale to round, look down, press into your left big toe. Left leg stays long. And exhale, look up, reach up. Cow pose. Notice the outer line of your right thigh. Can it be drawing back, the same position where we were feeling the muscles in like the clamshell that we were doing earlier? We want the outer thigh to be strong and the inner line of the left leg to be strong. So these two forces working in tandem is what's going to create more stability and more sensation here. Just one or two more times. Staying strong, drawing the inner line of the legs together. It's almost like your right pelvis is drawing towards your left. So that there's a more active and maybe even a more shaky sense because we're using more muscles in the legs than you're used to. But we're also using more of the stabilizers, which is the intention. 3, 2, and 1. Straighten your front leg to come up to stand and just rest for a moment. Hi, Cass. Thank you for the emote that appeared somewhere in this place. Now we're not quite done with this leg yet. We're going to take both blocks or whatever you have here, any taller object on the outside of the right leg in your case. We're gonna take the hands onto here, and this is why you want it to be something fairly stable, because we're gonna put quite a significant amount of weight on this object. And if you do not have anything, then I have also done in the past using both hands on like the knee or thigh. It's not quite the same because we want the stability to be a little bit out of the leg in this case, but it is what you can use in a pinch. So your right knee bends down. We're gonna draw in from the left hip, and then your right hand is on the blocks as we reach up here. So the left arm, will reach up towards the sky. The right knee pushes gently into the blocks, and we draw the left hip in towards the right hip. So the long leg is drawing in towards the short leg. And at the same time, the short leg is going to draw back in towards the long leg. So there will be a little bit of an internal squeezing sensation while you're reaching over here. Option to take the hand overhead to feel a little bit more length. Breathe in your Ujjayi breath. Find victory, find stability, find strength. Shaking is okay too. Shaking is you getting stronger. Hold for 5, for 4, 3, 2, and 1. Take your left hand onto your left hip and then rise up using the strength of the side body and straighten both legs. Heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe. Mostly because it's fun, and let your hands rest down at your sides. Take a moment just to notice the breath, the quality of your mind, and the quality of your glutes especially. We're going to take a moment to reflect and check in before we go on to the other side. Now, each one of us has a different experience with what happens in the hips here. You might keep your eyes closed just kind of while I chat a little bit. Now, how it works a little bit is your hip socket has the femur, which goes up inside of it. And depending on how deep it is, how the bone is angled, how twisted it is, and just almost all genetics, is going to change how deep you're going to get into some of these stances. It will change how open or closed your hips are. And so that's why there's a lot of variation allowed, because your hips are going to be different than mine, which are different than your neighbors, and so on. So it makes sense to do what is right for your body, because not everybody is going to be capable of opening up as wide as what they used to say was like open up your hips like a barn door. Well, our hips don't go that far for most of us, mine included. So if something doesn't quite feel right, I invite you always to do 10 or 20% less and honor and respect your body, so that we can do this for longevity, as is kind of the point here. So from here, let's step the left toes out, facing towards the short edge of your mat, blocks on either side of your foot, and then step your right foot back to be long. Fingertips come down to the blocks. Light on the hands as we bend the left knee to come forward into warrior one. Inhale to round through the spine, look back towards your back foot. Draw your back heel in as you press into the big right big toe. Exhale to come forward, long spine, shoulders pull back. Inhale to round. Right big toe, right inner arch lifts. I'm sorry, I meant right. I'm still getting used to mirroring. It's a whole different skill. Exhale to lengthen. Can you keep your hips stable and engaged even as you change positions? The hips want to stay in about the same strength and engagement. Outer left thigh stays strong and engaged back towards your hip. Inner right thigh draws down towards the floor. 2 more times. Straighten your left knee, draw yourself up lightly, just to give your legs a little moment. From straight legs, you can wiggle a little bit side to side. This is probably one of my favorite things to do, just to get things moving or to keep it fluid. And now setting up your blocks on the outside of your left foot. Take the left hand to your blocks, bend your left knee deeply, and then open up your heart and chest. As you lift your hand up long, we want a fairly decent amount of weight in this bottom hand. Sometimes you'll need to take the blocks lower if you have super long arms like I do. Inner right big toe, inner right arch lifts and stays long. You might even feel like the blade edge of your foot is pushing into the floor. Outer left glute draws back, but the knee telescopes forward. It almost feels like an expanding telescope as it reaches long into the stance. Similarly, your arm overhead can telescope and reach up and overhead, reaching along through the side body from blade edge of the foot all the way to your fingertips. Find stability and strength in these 3 points of contact: your left hand, left foot, right outer heel. Breathe in your victorious breath, embrace a little bit of shaking. And just notice what your body is feeling for 5. Yes, you can for 3, 2, and right hand comes to the right hip. Gently bring yourself back up to your standing position, and then heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe. Bring it on in. Take a deep breath and just pause here. We're done with the more challenging aspects of this, and the next portion is going to be more reflective and a little bit more centering, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan. So for now, just stand in mountain pose, arms relaxing at your side, as if any excess energy is just dripping off your fingertips like slow droplets of water. Just gently pattering onto the floor as you stand strong and tall. And then let's make our way down to the floor. Now we're going to set ourselves up. We're going to go back to the clamshell exercise we did a little bit earlier. And just see if there's anything that's changed from here to then. From then and now. So you can have your pillow as a blanket, or blanket as a pillow as you like. Just use your arm. Take your knees up to 90 degrees. And then again, with your right knee only, and your hands on your hips, or just below your trochanter, we're going to take the right knee up. Notice if there's any change in the smoothness of the motion, in the height of the motion, or in just what your hips sense as we move through. Let's do this 3 or 4 times. For some of us, we may have sensed that our knee is able to get higher now that we've had more engagement and more heat built into the outside of the glute. For some of us, the muscles are exhausted and will not get as high. Both are fine examples of what may happen. Let's switch over to the other side. Knees at 90 degrees, left hand on your trochanter, or just below your hips, and lift up. Try not to knock your blocks over. It's like a game of Jenga. I mean, only in the sense that we're trying not to knock the thing over, but so it's not really that much like Jenga, but that's what the first thing that came to mind. Slow and control, come back down. Good. Then we can roll onto our spines. If you have a yoga mat and a block-like setup, we're going to be rolling this up like this. So you will need your blanket as well. And if you don't have something to put your feet on, you can also just use your feet on the floor for this one, whatever works there. You're going to want your blanket in its long fashion. And then we're going to take our feet up on the block, your hips in nice and close, and then hook around your ankles with the blanket just coming up underneath your sacrum here, or on either side of your sacrum. So it's a little bit supporting your butt as your knees are lifted, and it's kind of locking in your ankles. Again, if you don't have a block, you can just do this with your ankles down on the ground. But the goal here is that your back gets to relax down towards the floor, your belly gets to relax, and maybe your sacrum is just a little bit lifted in this position. Now to close out class, we're just going to do a couple minutes of constructive rest here. And then a quiet meditation at the end. So go ahead and let yourself relax. And with nothing else to do in this moment, find a sense of calm. This is by some considered one of the hardest poses, is just to be in the present moment here. without going to future planning, without revisiting the past or going to fantasy. To assist in staying present, you might just stick with the breath, noticing its quality and smoothness. Maybe just notice its depth. Or noticing the support of the blanket that's hugging into your ankles lightly and supporting your hips with a little lift. And what you've done in this time is a method of self-support and self-care. Just by showing up today, you found victory. Couple more moments here. Nothing to do, nowhere to be. Just to allow your sense of yourself a sense of rest. Start to wiggle your toes a little bit. Maybe your knees sway a little bit side to side. Just start to invite a little bit more life back into your physical body. And then you can move the blanket. In this case, I like to just set it on the hips for a little bit of some weight and support, and then walk your feet out long and let the energy just kind of drain back in through the legs. You might feel some sensations come up from the hips. Using that sense of aliveness to just kind of float up through the legs, roll onto one side. And you can use your hands to support you to come back to a seated position, maybe the same position that you started in today. And I just ask that you take a moment to notice the quality of your body, your physical sense, but also the quality of your mind after today's practice. And just notice any felt sense of any changes that may have occurred. And then gently bring your hands to your heart. You might rest your thumbs against your sternum and just feel your heartbeat. And with an exhale, gently bow your head down to your hands. Namaste. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking this time for self-dedication, self-practice. And that'll be our class for today.